Da, da, da. Cheers! So I'm really excited to finish my first final of second year of medical school, one step closer to becoming a doctor. So I'm gonna just do a quick recap of how GI went, how I studied for it, and kind of how FSU is navigating the pandemic while still producing doctors. Honestly, there's not a lot of excitement going on in second year in the middle of COVID. I wanted to do a day in the life of a second year medical student, but we're in the middle of COVID, and honestly, my day today is not really adventurous. I go from my bed to my desk to my kitchen to the bathroom and back to my bed. Like, that's all I do. I still wanted to share what my experience was like. So I gave you guys an introduction to M2 year and what it was gonna look like. Now I'm going to do a recap of GI because I always feel like people reach out and ask me how I studied for something, and then when I go back and think about it, it's just easier to refer people to videos. So in the future, when you're wondering how I study for GI, here it is. So today was my GI final and I passed, so that's all that matters. But I actually haven't gotten my grade back, but I know that I passed because they sent us an email saying, if you don't get another email, you have passed this final. So I'm really excited to finish my first final of second year of medical school, one step closer to becoming a doctor. So I'm gonna just do a quick recap of how GI went, how I studied for it, and kind of how FSU is navigating the pandemic while still producing doctors. GI is 4 weeks long, and it basically has everything to do with what's in the abdomen. So issues with your stomach, your blah, 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 blah. I already forgot everything. So it's mainly like your stomach, your esophagus, your intestines, and your gallbladder. That's the bulk of it. And FSU did something different where they stopped doing mostly lectures covering content, and all of that switched to online med ed, or also known as OME. And then we still had CLC, and we actually had it every other week. So in conjunction with our content that we're covering, they teach us the clinical skills. So we covered like superficial and deep palpation of the abdomen, feeling for the liver, locating the abdominal aorta, some of the stuff we did in our first year. So they just like reviewed it, and then they introduced us to ultrasound very briefly. And so we still had small group once a week, which we mainly did cases. We had large group. Most of them weren't mandatory, but our professors would do cases. And how did I study? So, I mean, most of you know I'm not a lecture attender, but I do value the content that is produced in lectures. So before exams, since professors typically choose questions that cover the content that they did, like if they emphasized a lot in a certain topic, I feel like they're more than likely to pick questions from that topic. So I like going to lecture because of that. And also our professors covered things more like clinically and less like textbooky. So it puts things into like real life perspective, like how an actual patient will present. And I'm not saying like, you know, patients don't present like they do in textbooks, but that's not always the case. So it's nice to see what my professors have to say outside of what's in the textbook or what's covered in Boards and Beyond, what's clinically relevant. So the bulk of my studying came from Boards and Beyond. And then I supplemented with Anki. So I would watch videos, do the Anki cards, keep up with my Anki every day. Maybe like there was 2 days that I fell a little bit behind, but for the most part, I kept up with it every day. For micro and pharm, that cover like the viruses that cause gastroenteritis or diarrhea, upset stomach, whatever. I use Sketchy Micro, and for all the pharmacology, I use Sketchy Pharm. And then I would watch the class lectures on 2x speed after the fact. So I would very rarely, I probably attended 2 classes, but I watched all the lectures on 2x speed after the fact. So I got everything I needed, and that's what I find helpful for me. And I think I did pretty good on the exam. I don't know what my grade is, but I will say that's probably the most confident I've ever walked out of an exam. I finished the exam with like almost more than, like a little bit more than an hour to spare, which is like very unusual. And yeah, when I was doing practice questions the week leading up, I was pressed for time. So there's an option on that's another thing I use. I use USMLE-RX for practice questions. I also use BRS, which is Board Review Series, for practice questions. And then there was a USMLE-RX Q&A book that I used as well. And I felt that those questions were really good. Although USMLE-RX practice questions did destroy my self-esteem, and I was very pressed for time. So I felt like after I walked out of the exam, I felt like the practice questions I was doing were a little bit harder than the ones that were presented in the exam. But that's just like my take on that. Maybe it's because I learned after I kept getting them wrong. I don't know. But key to success is practice questions. I think this is like some of like the most practice questions I've ever done for an exam. That might have played a factor in it. I don't know either. But GI was pretty straightforward. I think I did very well. That's kind of how I studied. I study just about every day, keep up with my Anki every day. But I aimed to cover all the content within the first 3 weeks, and then the last week was left for practice questions. But my professors did like reveal new content in that last week, like or on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I did have some last minute content to cover, but for the most part, I covered most of the material within 3 weeks. As many of you may know, my first aid book is divided up by blocks. And so in this book, I have everything for second year and starting with GI. And as I watch videos, I annotate my first aid book. So when it comes around to step review and step studying, all my first aid should be annotated. And as you can see on here. So highly recommend doing that. And honestly, I've watched like YouTube videos on like, you know, med school studying, and a lot of them recommend annotating first aid, which is like, you know, the med school Bible, which is very geared towards the step exam. And I just want to go ahead and put in a plug that's saying that you can still have a life in medical school. I was still able to keep up with working out 3 to 4 times a week. I cook a lot and I try to cook healthy, so you know, it takes me time. And I was able to keep up with vlogs. I started my podcast. I started my new series of Women in White Coats. I've filmed within GI alone. I started the podcast and I've filmed 8 episodes. I've released 2 episodes. I did my giveaway, and I also celebrated my birthday. I was able to watch multiple movies. I also kept up with my social media because, you know, I love social media. And honestly, like, I feel healthy. Like, I feel mentally good and happy, and I feel like I did well on my exam. And it's all to say that you can have a good time in medical school and you can succeed in medical school during a pandemic or besides a pandemic. And I think I'm 2 years off to a great start, and I'm looking forward to neuro, even though I've heard scary things about it. I hear it's just like a lot, but I'm hoping that what I learned in MSP3 will prime me or has primed me to what I'm gonna be up against. And I just hope that all the information goes into my brain and stays in my brain. But yeah, that's my next challenge, is mixing step review within studying for my blocks. But we'll see. I'm taking it all day by day. and I'm enjoying it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you find this vlog helpful, and whenever you take GI, I hope you watch it. And you can just apply the same study strategy to your other blocks too. I feel like I've refined my study strategy to this point, and that's typically what I do: cover content, annotate my first aid, and then lots of practice questions, lots of Anki. So yeah, cheers to being a second-year med student. I wish you all the best of luck. For those applying, interviewing, everything, sending you positive vibes. If you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Let me know what you think of my new series. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what content you like. If this is something that you found helpful, give it a thumbs up and let me know so I can make more. And yeah, cheers y'all. Happy Friday.